The heavy words spoken by the master of the house hung in the air like a thick cloud. His mocking tone made the room even colder, and the guests began to feel a quiet discomfort. They had eaten many different kinds of food in their lives, but they hadn't expected this dinner to be filled with such harshness. Eyes were fixed on the maid, who stayed at the back of the room, standing as if she could easily disappear into the walls, but she stood firm. Inside, her heart ached, but she had learned long ago how to keep her feelings hidden. It was not just about the taste or the food. It felt like something deeper was being attacked. The food represented more than a meal. It carried pieces of her life, her culture, and memories from a place far away. Yet, the man at the head of the table looked only at what was different from his own world. His words made it seem as though the life and experience behind her cooking were worthless. The guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure where to look or what to say. Some wanted to stand up for her, but the power in the room was heavy, and the man's voice carried a force that made many too afraid to speak. Silence grew, larger than ever, until it felt almost loud in its own way. Everyone knew the rules of this house. The master's opinion was final, and disagreement came with consequences. So, they sat quietly, hoping the meal would end quickly and the tension would fade. Meanwhile, the maid felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders like a stone. She had worked with her hands and her heart to prepare everything perfectly, and yet all she received was scorn. The years she spent in the kitchen, the sacrifices she made, and the hopes she held for respect seemed to vanish with that one harsh judgment. But she did not cry or speak. Her silence became a shield, protecting her spirit from breaking. She knew that sometimes strength was not in fighting back loudly, but in standing tall when no one else stood with you. At the other end of the table, the daughter watched with careful eyes. Unlike her father, she did not see the food as strange or unworthy. She remembered the times she had helped the maid in the small kitchen and had seen the patience and love that went into every dish. She had tasted these meals many times and found comfort in them. The flavors told stories of distant lands and told of a life filled with struggle and hope. She understood just how special the meal was. She also saw the pain in the maid's eyes, the quiet dignity that was almost invisible, but very real. The daughter's heart was full of a quiet anger, not against her father, but against the unfairness she had quietly witnessed for years. She wondered why her father could not see the beauty in something so honest and pure because of where it came from. As the man continued to speak, his voice still sharp but losing some of its confidence, the daughter decided she could stay silent no longer. She took a small breath and slowly put down her fork. All eyes quickly turned to her as she spoke calmly but firmly. Her voice was soft, but it held a strength that surprised everyone. She praised the meal, speaking about the care taken to choose fresh ingredients, to blend spices just right, and to cook each dish with love. She explained that the flavors were new to many at the table, but that did not make them wrong or bad. In fact, she said, they showed a world full of diversity and experience that was worth learning about and appreciating. Her words felt like a fresh breeze blowing through the stuffy room. For one moment, the power in the air shifted, becoming lighter and warmer. The master of the house looked at his daughter with a mixture of surprise and confusion. He had never heard such words from her before in front of guests. He opened his mouth to reply, but found no sharp comment ready. Somehow, her quiet courage had made him unsure. Around the table, others nodded slowly, feeling the truth in her words even if they had been silent until now. The maid watched the daughter's face close up, feeling a tiny spark of hope growing inside her. She wanted to thank her, but knew this was not the right time. Instead, she gave a small, grateful smile, a silent thank you that no one else could hear. The guests began to relax, and some even reached out to taste the food with new interest. The sense of judgment melted a little, replaced by curiosity and respect. Though the meal had started with coldness and mockery, it was ending with a feeling of warmth, one born from kindness and understanding. In that moment, the house no longer felt like a place ruled only by power and pride. For a few hours, it became a place where respect and empathy could shine through. The daughter's bravery had opened a door for change, showing that standing up for what is right does not require shouting, but simply choosing to speak the truth with kindness. The maid, while still quiet, felt her strength return. She realized that even though some people may not see her worth now, the respect shown by the daughter was a sign that hearts could change. She thought about the countless meals she would still prepare, not just to feed others, but to teach a lesson about dignity and love without words. Outside the big windows, the night grew deeper, and stars twinkled silently as if they too were watching the subtle shift inside the grand house. The sounds of laughter, soft conversation, and the clinking of glasses returned to the room, bringing life back into the gathering. The meal was no longer just about food. It had been a moment of learning and growth for everyone there. That dinner would be remembered by all who were present, not just for the food, but for a daughter's courage and a maid's quiet strength. It was a story about respect, kindness, and the small acts that can begin to change even the coldest hearts. And in the days to come, the house would never look quite the same again. As the daughter's words floated gently across the dining room, the atmosphere shifted in a way that no one had expected. The boldness and kindness in her voice carried a quiet power. The guests, who had been tense and uncertain just moments before, now looked up with soft eyes that reflected a new curiosity and respect. The coldness that had hung over the table was slowly melting, replaced by something warmer, a sense of understanding spreading quietly through the room. The master of the house sat motionless, his expression hard to read. For years, he had been the unquestioned voice of authority, speaking sharply whenever he wished. His words had often been like a storm, breaking the peace and making others afraid to speak. But tonight was different. The calm and gentle tone of his daughter's defense of the maid's cooking made him pause. It was as if her words had opened a small crack in the walls he had built around his opinions. The harshness faded for a moment, and even the master felt something unfamiliar stir inside. A soft feeling, maybe respect, or at least uncertainty. The maid, standing quietly near the edge of the room, felt the tension shift like a breath released from a tight space. Her heart, which had been pressed down by years of unspoken pain, now beat with a little more hope. She understood the meaning behind the daughter's words. Not just praise for the meal, but an invitation for others to see her as a person full of value and dignity. There was no anger or loud protest, just a gentle breaking of silence that spoke volumes. The guests began to unfold their own feelings softly. Some smiled kindly at the maid, while others slowly returned to tasting the food with new interest. The flavors that had seemed strange and foreign a little while ago now felt exciting, like a story waiting to be discovered bite by bite. The table, which had been silent and cold, came alive again with quiet conversation, curiosity replacing judgment. One of the guests leaned toward the woman sitting next to them and whispered, "I never thought this kind of food could taste so wonderful." Another nodded. "It reminds me of a place I once visited, far away. It's different but beautiful." These small voices grew louder as more began to appreciate the rich taste and the story behind each dish. Words of admiration and surprise traveled softly through the room. The daughter watched this change with quiet satisfaction, feeling proud of the little ripple her words created. Earlier, she had been nervous, unsure if her voice would carry any meaning in a room where her father's was so strong. But now she realized that kindness and truth, spoken calmly, could shine brighter than any loud argument. She looked at her father and saw a flicker of thought in his eyes, something that had never been there before. The master of the house cleared his throat and finally spoke. His voice was softer than before, almost as if he was talking to himself. He said, "Perhaps I was too quick to judge." The words surprised everyone. It wasn't a loud apology, but the tone carried a weight heavier than any sharp comment. There was an honesty in admitting error, even if quietly, that filled the room with a strange, new energy. He looked directly at the maid, eyes searching hers for something he had never truly seen. The woman met his gaze steadily, holding no bitterness or anger, only patience and quiet strength. The room waited, breath held tight to see what would happen next. The daughter smiled gently, knowing that this moment was only the beginning of something much bigger. It was more than just a simple dinner or a polite gesture. It was a lesson about respect, about the beauty found in each person's story no matter where they came from. It was about breaking down walls built from pride and fear, and about opening the heart to new experiences. For the maid, the change was both surprising and deeply moving. She had not expected the master to say anything kind. After years of serving silently, she felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long time. The kitchen, once a place of hard labor and quiet endurance, now also held the memory of this evening, a night when food became a bridge between people and courage sparked a new beginning. Slowly, the dinner continued, no longer shadowed by hurtful words. Conversations blossomed around the table. Guests shared stories about their own favorite foods and places they had visited. The daughter listened as friends and strangers found connection through the dishes on their plates. She thought about how something as simple as a meal could open hearts and change minds. Outside, the air was cool and still, but inside, the warmth grew. The ordinary act of sharing food became, for that evening, a powerful message about kindness, respect, and the strength found in standing up for others. As the night wore on, the master of the house seemed quieter, his usual sharpness softened by thought. His daughter saw a small change in him, a willingness to listen and perhaps to learn. The maid felt a quiet peace settle over her, knowing that the seeds of respect had been planted. When the last plate was cleared and the guests prepared to leave, there was a feeling of connection among them that had not been there before. It was not just because they had eaten a meal together, but because something deeper had happened. They had witnessed courage, kindness, and the power of words spoken from the heart. As the door closed behind the final guest, the maid quietly returned to the kitchen. This small space, filled with the scent of spices and memories, was where she would continue her work of love and care. The daughter joined her, ready to learn more, to cook more, and to stand by her side. The master of the house remained seated at the dining table, his thoughts deep and uncertain. But a new feeling was growing inside him, a feeling that maybe there was more to life than power and pride. Maybe, just maybe, the true strength was in respect and kindness. And so, the night ended not with silence, but with quiet hope. Hope that the future would bring more understanding and less judgment, more acceptance and less mockery. For the maid, the daughter, the master, and all who had shared that meal, a new chapter was beginning, written not with harsh words, but with gentle courage and the simple language of the heart. In a grand house filled with the sounds of soft music and clinking glasses, a special dinner was about to take place. This wasn't just any meal. It was something everyone looked forward to, especially because the lady of the house, who worked as a maid, was known for cooking meals from her homeland. She had spent hours preparing every dish with care and love. Her kitchen was a small, simple place, but it was where magic happened. The smells of spices, fresh vegetables, and slow-cooked meat filled the air and traveled all the way into the dining room where the family and their guests were waiting. Among the people gathered for dinner was the master of the house, a very rich and powerful man. He was tall and always dressed neatly in expensive clothes that shone under the bright lights. He liked to be the center of attention and was known for being very proud. His words often carried a sharp tone, and he liked things done his way. The maid had been working in the house for many years, and even though she was quiet and humble, she had become an important part of the household because of her hard work and good heart. Tonight, the same man who controlled the house and everyone in it was about to eat the meal she had cooked. People whispered quietly, wondering how the man would react. The lady of the house moved with quiet confidence as she served each dish. She placed the food on the table carefully, hoping to make a good impression. The guests took their seats, and the man settled into his chair, ready to start the meal. Everyone's eyes were on him, waiting for his first words. The house was large and decorated with beautiful paintings and shiny furniture, but the mood was strange that evening. The man's eyes scanned the plates with little interest. The people at the table noticed the hard look on his face. He lifted his fork and tasted the first bite, but didn't say anything at first. The woman who had cooked the meal watched closely from a distance, her hands folded gently, her heart beating a little faster. She knew his opinion mattered the most, even if he had never been kind with his words before. The daughter of the house also sat quietly, watching her father. She was different from him. Soft-spoken and kind-hearted, she cared about people more than things. She often helped the maid in the kitchen, learning the recipes and stories behind each dish. Tonight, she held her breath, wondering if her father would finally appreciate the food he had always ignored. As the man continued eating, a smile slowly disappeared from his face. Then, without warning, he spoke aloud, loud enough for everyone to hear. His words were sharp, and he mocked the food, saying it tasted strange and foreign to him. The room went cold with silence. The maid's eyes dropped down, but she kept her calm. The guests exchanged nervous glances. Some looked down at their plates, while others looked away, unsure how to react. The daughter felt a tight knot form in her stomach as she saw the hurt in the woman's eyes. The man did not stop at one insult. He made more comments about the way the food looked and how it was cooked. His words felt like cold wind in a warm room. He laughed a little, thinking he had made a joke, but his laughter only made the tension grow. The maid stood still, her face steady, but inside, her feelings were a storm of sadness and disappointment. In that moment, no one could imagine what would happen next. The world outside the house was calm, with stars shining quietly in the night sky. But inside, the weight of those few words filled the room. This evening was more than dinner. It was a moment that could change everything. The guests began to wonder if anyone would stand up for the maid, or if the silence would remain as thick as the darkness outside. The daughter shifted in her seat, ready to say something, but waiting for the right time. All the while, the maid reminded herself why she had cooked this meal with such care. It was not just about food. It was about sharing a piece of her life, her culture, and her heart. Even though she was mocked, she knew the story behind each dish was rich with hope and memory. The kitchen was her sanctuary, and tonight she had brought a little of that warmth into the grand dining room. The powerful man's voice had broken the gentle peace, but his daughter silently planned her next move. She had seen the strength behind the maid's quiet presence for years, and now was the moment to show her father and everyone else that respect and kindness mattered the most at the dinner table. In the quiet that followed, the air was full of possibilities, waiting to be shaped by what would come next. The silence that followed the daughter's gentle but powerful words settled over the dinner table like a soft blanket. It was the kind of silence that speaks louder than any argument or applause, a silence filled with thought, reflection, and the slow fading of old ideas. The guests looked at one another quietly, realizing that this simple meal had become much more than just food on their plates. It had become a moment of learning, a moment where hearts began to soften and eyes began to see beyond first impressions. The master of the house, sitting at the head of the table, slowly set down his fork. His gaze, which had once been sharp and judgmental, now held a different expression, one mixed with surprise, confusion, and even a hint of regret. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came easily. For years, he had ruled the house with certainty, quick to criticize and slow to show kindness. Yet tonight, his daughter's words had shaken the foundation of his confidence. The maid, standing near the wall with quiet dignity, felt every eye in the room upon her. The weight of the man's earlier mockery still lingered, but it had softened under the daughter's gentle defense. She hoped deeply that this night would be a turning point, not only for her but for the household as a whole. She thought about the many long days spent cooking and cleaning, often feeling invisible despite her hard work. The feeling of invisibility had been painful, but tonight she was seen, truly and deeply, in a way she hadn't experienced before. The guests began to shift in their seats, breaking the heavy silence with small murmurs of agreement and appreciation. The food, which before had been met with suspicion or silence, was now met with interest and respect. A few asked questions about the flavors and ingredients, curious to learn more. The mood around the table slowly warmed and the sense of division began to dissolve. One guest quietly said, "It is different from what I am used to, but I find it quite delightful." Another nodded and smiled. The care that went into this meal is clear. It tells a story. These small moments of appreciation spread gently, like ripples in a quiet pond. The table no longer felt like a place of power and control, but a place where stories and lives connected. The daughter watched all of this quietly, her heart filled with hope and pride. For years, she had watched her father treat the maid as less than equal. never understanding the strength wrapped in her quietness or the beauty in her traditions. Tonight she had spoken for what she believed was right. She had acted not just for the maid, but for everyone who had ever felt small or unseen. As she looked at her father again, she saw something new in him, a hint of humility. His eyes, once so full of pride, now held questions. Would he change? Would he learn to see beyond the surface? These were questions only time could answer, but in that moment, the door to change had been cracked open. The maid, encouraged by the gentle shift, stepped forward a little, her voice soft but steady. She thanked the daughter for her kind words and expressed her joy in sharing food that carried the memories of her family and homeland. Her voice, though quiet, had a strength that moved the room. It reminded everyone present that behind every dish, there was a person with a story, stories of hope, struggle, and love. The master of the house, touched by the courage and honesty before him, found himself searching for words to respond, to reconcile his long-held views with the warmth filling the room. Finally, he said, "Perhaps I have much to learn about the things I have dismissed too quickly." His tone lacked the sharpness of before, and instead carried a softness that surprised all who heard it. In that moment, the house felt different. The walls that had once echoed with commands and coldness now seemed to carry a faint light of respect and understanding. The dinner had become a turning point, not because of grand speeches or loud arguments, but because of quiet courage and kindness that spoke volumes. The daughter and maid exchanged a glance filled with unspoken promise, a promise that this night was just the beginning. The future held hope for more meals shared in respect, more voices raised in kindness, and fewer walls built from fear and judgment. As the evening drew to a close, the guests left with smiles and soft words, carrying with them not just full stomachs, but a deeper appreciation for diversity and the power of empathy. The maid returned to her kitchen not as a silent servant, but as a keeper of stories, hope, and quiet strength. The master of the house remained seated for a while longer, thinking about the lessons learned. Change did not come easily, but on this night it had begun. One word, one meal, and one brave voice at a time. Outside, the world was dark and peaceful, but inside the house, a new light had started to shine, one that would grow slowly, nurtured by courage, understanding, and respect for all the stories that each person carried. The days after the special dinner in the grand house were filled with a quiet but meaningful change. The night had left its mark on everyone, though no one spoke of it loudly. The atmosphere in the home was different, softer, more thoughtful, and filled with small moments that showed hope for a better understanding among its people. The master of the house moved through his day as usual, but his thoughts were heavy and new feelings stirred inside him. He remembered the daughter's words and the courage she showed standing up for the maid. That moment made him realize how much he had missed in his years of pride and sharp judgment. It wasn't easy to admit, even to himself, but he began to wonder whether respect and kindness were more valuable than power and control. He found himself watching the maid in a new light. He noticed her quiet strength as she worked around the house, the patience in her movements, and the gentle care she gave to every task. He began to understand that she was more than a servant. She was a person with a full life, rich with experience and dignity. This recognition, small but growing, marked the beginning of a slow change in how he treated those around him. The maid, too, felt a shift inside her. While she continued to carry out her duties, she no longer felt invisible. She remembered the daughter's gentle support and the moments of curiosity from the guests about her food and stories. These small signs of appreciation filled her heart with a quiet new hope. She believed that maybe, just maybe, the days of mockery and silence were giving way to days of respect and understanding. The daughter herself continued to play a special role in the household. She spent more time with the maid in the kitchen, learning recipes and listening to stories of a life far from the glitter of the grand house. She found joy not only in the cooking, but also in witnessing the maid's strength and wisdom. Through these moments, the daughter's love and respect deepened, and she often spoke softly about the importance of kindness and equality, inspiring others around her. Word of the dinner and its unexpected turn spread quietly among the staff and close friends. Conversations began about the power of empathy, about seeing the person behind the roles we all play. The simple act of sharing food became a symbol of a new beginning, a bridge connecting different worlds within the same home. In the weeks that followed, small changes became noticeable. The master no longer spoke with the same harshness. His words had softened, and his glance held less judgment and more thoughtfulness. He started to ask questions rather than give commands, and even tried the food again, telling the maid quietly, "It is better than I thought." This simple admission carried deep meaning for both of them. The maid, encouraged by these changes, found herself more confident. She shared more of her dishes with the family, each one a story, a memory, a piece of her past. The kitchen became a place of warmth and sharing rather than just work. The daughter's presence there made it a space filled with laughter and conversation, bridging gaps that had seemed too wide before. The guests who visited the house after that evening often asked about the food and the stories behind it. The maid told her stories without fear or shame, proud to share her heritage. People listened and learned, realizing how much beauty lay in diversity and openness. This change was not sudden or easy. Old habits and attitudes take time to fade. But the dinner had planted a seed of respect, kindness, and courage to speak up. Each small act of understanding became a step toward breaking down walls built from fear and pride. The master of the house found himself reflecting on his own life and what truly mattered. He realized that power without kindness left a cold and lonely place, while respect and empathy could build warmth and connection. Though it was a slow journey, he took his first real steps toward becoming a better person. The daughter, full of hope and determination, continued to speak softly but firmly. She became a quiet leader in the house, not through words of command, but through acts of care and respect. Her example inspired others to look beyond the surface and find the humanity in everyone. The maid, once mocked and unseen, now stood as a symbol of quiet strength and hope. She showed that dignity is not just found in titles or wealth, but in the courage to hold one's head high and in the kindness shared with others. Her cooking, full of stories and love, became a bridge between worlds, teaching all who tasted it the true flavor of respect. As the sun rose and set over the grand house day after day, the light inside grew brighter because the people inside had begun to open their hearts. The story that started with mockery ended with silence, filled with meaning, with respect that blossomed quietly but surely. The house, once ruled by pride and sharp words, was now a place where kindness and understanding took root. It was a reminder to all that sometimes change begins with a single brave voice, a simple meal shared with love, and the courage to see and honor each other's stories. And so life moved forward, filled with hope. A hope that the future would bring more moments of respect, more courage to stand up for one another, and a deeper understanding that true value lies in the heart, not in status or pride. The connections made that night would grow, touching lives and shaping a better tomorrow in the most human of ways.